today. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Hi. Thank you. Thank you. You can stop now. Great. Wow, it's good to see everybody today. Welcome back to class. We are in week 10. Man, we are moving through.
Class, we are in week 10, man.
Shut up. I don't want to hear it. I don't want to hear it. Not a bit. So, damn it. I even thought I cut it off before class, but I didn't figure it out. Oh well. I guess it's going to happen 15 more times before the end of this semester. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Still haven't figured out the technology. Nope. I still got old man's disease sometimes. Oh man, seems to be the running joke on this class, doesn't it? Okay, so I hope everybody's doing well. Let's go ahead and get started on chapter 10. Oh, by the way, quick shout out to Tara. Congratulations on your Neuromatrix performance. Woo woo. You did a great job. She took down the leaderboard this week. I'll have a full report available on the Neuromatrix tomorrow for everybody. It'll be available by tomorrow morning. So I do hope that you take a look at that. So let's go ahead and get started on class. So this week, chapter 10, sex and gender. So today we're going to talk a little bit about sex from a biological and developmental standpoint, and then we'll talk about sexual behavior from a behavioral standpoint on Thursday. Okay, so today we're going to talk a little bit about how sex and gender are created and developed. We'll talk about inconsistencies in biological sex, and then we'll talk about the development of gender identity. Now, one of the things for me, I grew up in the 70s, I grew up in the South, and we were sort of taught that there were two sexes. There were males, XY chromosomes, and there were females, XX chromosomes. And that was it. That was the beginning and the end. But actually, the development of your full sexuality from your genetic material is a very complicated process that involves genetic as well as epigenetic forces. And these forces, just like any other developmental quality develops, there are variations in how sex and gender do develop. So one of the things that I want you to start off by doing today, and probably you're millennials, so it's easier for you to do this than it is for people in my generation. I want to disabuse you of the notion that there are just males and there are just females, and that's how it turns out. It's a lot more complicated than that. Okay, now what you're looking at over here on this side of the screen, way down here on the other side, is a karyotype. And this is sort of the picture of the genetic instructions of a human being. You see the female in the top and the male in the bottom. So these are the 46 chromosomes, or 23 pairs of chromosomes that that each of your human cells is going to have. Now, you'll notice on the very bottom, right corner of both of these black boxes, you'll see the 23rd pair of chromosomes, which are the sex chromosomes. You'll see in the tops you have the female, and this female has two X chromosomes. And you'll see that down at the bottom, you have the 23rd pair is the one tall X chromosome, and then the little short stubby Y chromosome. Now, it turns out that there's a spot on the Y chromosome called the SRY, the sex-determining region of the Y, and that is important for turning the human zygote into a male. So we all start out with this equipotentiality for being male or female, and on the Y chromosome is a little area that starts a cascade of processes that turns the organism into a male as opposed to the female. Now, the first area of complexity that you should know is that it doesn't happen in all of the chromosomes, but there are a few chromosome positions where there may be more than 2 chromosomes. These chromosome abnormalities can occur in the 21st pair of chromosome. Anybody heard of trisomy 21? Can somebody tell me what the common name for trisomy 21 is? Going to sit and see if anybody's got that. Come on, one of my medical students. Who knows what trisomy 21 is? Okay, and that means that you have 3 chromosomes in the 21st pair. You have what's known as Down syndrome. All right, so just like you can have variations that lead to specific outcomes there, you can have variations in the 23rd pair as well. So you can have some males who have 2 X chromosomes and 1 Y, and you know what? There are some males with 2 Y chromosomes and 1 X. And you know what? There are some females with 3 X chromosome, and some females are born with only 1 chromosome. Oh, Tara Solomon was going to say it. All right, good job. I'm glad you knew it, Tara, even if you didn't get it in time. I must have a delay on the broadcast. Okay, so what you need to know is the SRY gene on the Y chromosome stimulates the growth of the testes at 6 to 7 weeks of development, which increases testosterone levels. If there's no SRY gene, no Y chromosome, then you get the development of ovaries and the estrogens, which are the female hormones. So at the first branching point right here at 6 and 7 weeks, you have to have this SR gene, and it has to create this growth of the testes. And if you have some sort of mutation and this doesn't happen in the prototypical manner, right there you get a branching point where maybe you don't get someone who is completely male or is completely female. So even in the genetics, genes create proteins and proteins create you. So there's sort of this intermediate step. You may have the Y gene, but if the Y chromosome, but if the gene on it isn't expressed properly, then you won't get this burst of testosterone or estrogen at 6 weeks of development in utero. Now, these hormones are going to lead to the growth of both primary and secondary sex characteristics. So males and females both produce androgens and estrogens. Males produce more androgens than estrogens. Females produce more estrogens than androgens. And one common form of androgen is testosterone, and the other common form of estrogen is, I think that's estradiol. Okay. So if you look right here, the we typically differentiate between primary sex characteristics and secondary sex characteristics. The primary sex characteristics are those that allow for reproduction. So the maturation of the sex organs, the development of sperm in males, and the start of menstruation and the production of egg cells in females. Those are our primary sex characteristics. Now, these hormones are going to stay at relatively low levels throughout infancy and early and middle childhood, but starting around the end of middle to late childhood, right before adolescence, you're going to get a burst of hormones for males and females. The males' hormone production of testosterone is going to shoot through the roof, and females are going to get a burst of estrogen production, and this is going to lead to the development of secondary sex characteristics. Now, these characteristics are not related to reproduction, but they do give us the characteristic telltale signs of males and females. And you'll see in the picture that I've got right over here, you've got the description of these secondary sex characteristics: the facial hair in men, the deepening voice, the triangulated body shape, and the increased muscle mass. For females, you're going to get the fat on the breasts, the breast growth, the body hair in the armpits, and sort of the hourglass shape caused by the growth of fat on the hips. So these are your secondary sex characteristics. Now, you're going to sort of epic events for males and females are menarche and spermarche. Menarche is the first menstrual period for females when they start releasing the first egg cell, and spermarche, which is the first production of sperm in males. Yeah, I'm sorry. It feels like biology class to me. Feels like 8th grade biology class to me, Jessica. Sort of weird that they always seem to put this in the psychology textbook, and that's fine. But it always makes me a little awkward. Feels a little awkward to teach. Yeah, absolutely. The hips and the shoulders. So the men get the butt, the big shoulders, and the females develop the hips. Absolutely. So now here's the thing. So we can have these two different kinds of things that can go on. There can be extra X chromosomes or extra Y chromosomes in your genetic material, or when you're developing the genes on these chromosomes can cause proteins to be expressed inappropriately or at inappropriate times. And what happens is these combination of chromosomal abnormalities or gene expression abnormalities will lead to situations where males will have both male and female sex characteristics, both primary and secondary sex characteristics. We refer to people in this situation as having what we'd call an intersex, being intersexed instead of being biologically male or biologically female. So it turns out that there are some females are born missing an X chromosome, and their ovaries do not develop, and they are sterile, so leading to low levels of estrogen and sterility in females. And so sometimes you'll get females who have a chromosomal abnormality like this, which causes them not to develop those secondary sex characteristic of producing viable eggs. Now, sometimes a genetic female for some reason is exposed to greater androgens in utero. Maybe there's a gene in the chromosomes that causes the testosterone levels to increase too high. And what happens is the genitals kind of develop somewhere between male and female. That's called congenital hyperplasia. What's the percentage of people who have this? These are going to be very, very rare. I think we're talking 1 in 4,000. Spencer, this is going to be if you're talking about congenital hyperplasia. I think that's what you're asking. Now, another chromosomal disorder is the Klinefelter syndrome. So sometimes genetic males will have 2 X chromosomes. And in fact, I've got a video about this in your course resources folder. A lot of men do not even realize they have Klinefelter syndrome until much later in their life, around my age. And they have just problems or situations, but they don't really know what they are because they don't cause serious problems, and these people go undiagnosed for most of their life. So your Klinefelter syndrome is going to be a genetic male born with an extra Y chromosome. Now, sometimes they may develop breasts, they may be infertile, they're going to have reduced muscle mass, and they're going to have less facial and body hair than other men. So that's Klinefelter syndrome. You know what, Spencer, that's a great question. You're asking about likelihoods compared to other genetic abnormalities. That's an epidemiology question that I don't think I can answer. I appreciate you asking. What about women who grow facial hair less? Uh, Obscurely. What about women who grow facial hair? Uh, yes, there are women who do grow facial hair, and the weird thing is that we've all got testosterone and estrogen uh, coursing through our bodies. For males, it's going to be a ton more testosterone. I think 10 times more testosterone than females, and the females are going to have 4 times as much estrogen as males. I think that those are the proper numbers, but we still have those hormones in our body, Spencer, and those kinds of hormones can lead to these sort of masculine or feminine characteristics. Now, sometimes a male may be insensitive to the release of the testosterone. So maybe the testosterone is released at the proper time in utero, but the body does not respond to the testosterone. And this leads to the male primary sex characteristics not developing. And this is called androgen insensitivity syndrome. So, in a sense, what I want you to understand, and this is the part that I think a lot of people don't understand, and what I had to come around to understand, is that your X or Y chromosomes just get things started. But it depends upon the instructions on those chromosomes and how those instructions play out during the development in utero, if that makes sense. And sometimes it happens that you don't grow up into the what we call prototypical male or prototypical female. We fall somewhere in the middle. You know, Spencer asks a good question about foods that contain these hormones and can these affect the levels in our body. The short answer would be maybe. In fact, I don't think. Nope, I don't have that in this class, but in my developmental psych class that I'm talking about at 1 o'clock, we're actually going to suggest the data show that menarche, the first menstruation for females, has decreased from an average age of around 17 in 1900 to around 12 in the year 2020. So this very biological process, the starting of puberty in females, has actually decreased from 17 to around 12 over the last 100 years. Now, I don't have any evidence, but I'm going to suggest, Spencer, that probably has something to do with the diet, the quality of the food we eat, the amount of food we're eating, and also, to answer your question, the hormones and the chemicals that are put in those foods. Does that make sense? Actually, it turns out environmental factors affect the onset of puberty in boys and girls as well. Okay, now, here's the thing. This is where people get, I think, even a little more bent out of shape. If you can develop and be intersexed, and that you have some primary and secondary male characteristics and some primary and secondary male characteristics, the mind that goes along with those characteristics can also either match or not match the genetic sex. So we talk about biological sex as being determined by sort of your genetic material. Are you XX? Well, then biologically you would be a female. Are you XY? Well, then biologically we would call you a male. Let's talk about that as one way of your sex, but then there's also the sex that's in your mind. We're going to call that your gender, which is your understanding of yourself as either a male or as a female. Now, even though we don't know exactly how it happens and you can't see mind, and we remember I talked to you about the cognitive perspective and the fact that we can never see thoughts, and people can never see your gender identity thoughts. So it's really easy to dismiss that as people just making things up. But your beliefs about yourself as being a male or a female are, in a sense, biologically determined by the cascade of hormones and chemicals in the developmental process that occurs in you. And just like you can be intersexed biologically with primary and secondary sex characteristics, you can see, in a sense, I won't call it intersex because I don't want to use that word, but there can be a lack of match between your biological sex and your sense of gender identity. So the word that I discovered several years ago, I had a student write me a discussion board post and use the word cisgender, and I did not realize what that was till I looked it up. And that's when your sex and your gender identity actually match, right? And we're going to contrast that with people who are transgender, when their gender and their sex identity don't match. All right. Now, there's some people who may be biologically male and be female, and there are people who are biologically female and may feel male. But you know, there are also some people who feel both male and female. Your book describes them as androgynous, and there's some people who don't really feel female or male, and those people may be called genderqueer. Okay, I'm sorry, I've got several interesting questions here. Okay, hopefully you folks are taking care of each other in the discussion board, because I'm in the middle of talking and I don't have enough focus to do good discussion board monitoring right now. I'm at the top of my biology level. I'm giving the biopsych lecture. It's always a little challenging for me. Now, let's talk about, not only do we have sort of feelings of whether or not we are male or female, but let's talk about your preferences as well. And your sexual orientation is sort of the idea that's different than your gender. Okay, so your gender is your belief of who you are as a male or female. And let's talk about your sexual orientation. That's being the nature of your enduring sexual or romantic attraction to other people. And not all people are heterosexual and are attracted to people of the opposite sex. So another upshot is not all people's sexual preference is limited to one sex. There is sexual fluidity out there. And the research shows that females actually show a little more sexual fluidity than males. So they do galvanic skin response and pupil dilation research. And what they show is that females do respond with arousal to both, are more likely to respond with arousal to both male and females more often than are males. So what the upshot from this draft, from this chart here, is for you to appreciate that not everybody's heterosexual. We know that, but not everybody is either heterosexual or homosexual. That there is actually fluidity between these two poles, and in fact all of us exist upon some sort of continuum, from being totally straight to being totally homosexual. There are variations, and if you look at the chart I've got way down here in the corner over here, what you're going to see is that while most people, males and females, respond as being completely straight, okay, you'll see, let's see, actually the way to put it, I guess, would be to say, is if it was just either or, you would see people saying they were either completely straight or completely gay or lesbian. But what you're going to see is in the middle, there are variations where people feel more attraction for one sex than the other, but they do feel an attraction for both sexes. I hope I butchered that. Okay, so I guess the point I'm trying to make is that there is fluidity in these sexual orientation. It's not just an either or. There's also pansexual. That's a good point. Actually, the discussion could get really complex, Tara. And in fact, if anybody's interested, I think there's who's giving a talk this semester. The Full Spectrum Club is giving a talk this semester where they usually feature people from all different types of these sexual orientations, so you can sort of listen to them talk and hear their experiences for how they experience sexual attraction. So there are a lot of orientations. We have a da 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 da. Okay, cool. All right, so I do want you to appreciate that. Now, here's what we're going to talk about in webinar this week. Okay, now we finally get to psychology. This is the part that I feel a little more comfortable about. So the question is, how much of what you do as a male or female is determined by your biology, and how much is socialized by your environment? So not only do we have primary and secondary sex characteristics that differentiate between males and females, but we also have differences, ways of dressing, ways of acting, and responding to situations that we typically think of as prototypically male or prototypically female. And so there are roles that all of us are expected to learn in order to be consistent with the gender that we've been given by society. Now we're going to talk about primarily male and females, because that's really how society socializes us. They don't socialize us to have a third or a fourth or a fifth category. Basically, when you grow up, your parents, from the time you are born, are conditioning you to either be a prototypical male or a prototypical female. Okay, and so this is what we'll call gender role socialization. And this is where we teach little boys to play with guns and trucks and be aggressive. And we teach little girls to play with baby dolls and cooperate and play quietly and don't get their clothes dirty, right? And so this is the process of enculturating us to have the expectations about roles, preferences, behaviors, and beliefs that are consistent with our sex. Now, if you'll remember, we talked about behaviorism in chapter 6, and I'm going to keep coming back to behaviorism because they're really, you'll find them in all of the different areas of psychology. They argue that human beings socialize each other to gender roles through observational learning, modeling, and operant conditioning. So, little boys watch what their little dads do and try to copy those behaviors. Little girls watch what their moms do and try to copy those behaviors. We try to copy those that look similar to us. And not only that, we are rewarded for playing with appropriate toys and punished for playing with inappropriate toys. So your mom smiles when the little girl plays with a doll and maybe tries to refocus her little daughter when she starts playing with the truck. Erin says she doesn't necessarily agree with gender roles. And I would argue that you are probably right, especially since gender roles, I think, inherently are organized along lines of hierarchy, with males having more. The roles build in a sense of superiority for males, so it's not like these roles are definitely equal. Correct? That's a good question, though. Mud pies and Hot Wheels. The question though is, do we want to? What's the alternative to teaching our kids gender roles? What is the alternative? You know what I mean? Can you raise such a thing as a gender-free child? Is that possible? Now, for this week's webinar, I want you to watch a video. It's in your webinar folder. There's a video about it's a news story about a Toronto couple that are raising a gender-free child. So not only are they not putting the child in male clothes or female clothes, I forget what the kid's name is. Oh, goodness me. It's a gender-free name, but they're not telling anybody what sex the child is. They're not using pronouns to refer to the child. They're bringing the child up without any information at all about their gender. What do you think about that? Now, what we're going to do this week is we're going to talk about that and see if that's a really, really good idea or not. But there are some really cool videos in the course resources folder that show you how easy it is to socialize your kid towards a given gender role without even thinking about it. It's almost automatic. It is subconscious the way we socialize our little boys and our little girls. And while Tara may be a mud pie playing tough girl, everybody knew she was violating gender rules when she was playing mud pies and climbing trees, right? Okay, so now there is a story in your book, though, that suggests there's a story of Bruce in your textbook on page 390. You have to read this book. And basically, it says that even though gender role socialization is very, very powerful in determining the kinds of things we wear, the kinds of things we talk about, the kinds of activities we engage in, gender role socialization cannot overcome biology. And if you read the story of Bruce Reimer, it turns out that his penis was damaged during the circumcision process at 7 months. I don't know who does a circumcision at 7 months, but his penis was destroyed, and so the doctor said for his psychological well-being, his parents should bring him up as a female. So they had his penis removed and the skin shaped like a vagina, and started bringing him up as a female. And he, of course, rejected this because the biology could not be overcome by the gender role socialization that his parents tried to do. And he actually reverted back to being a boy as soon as they told him what they had done, and wound up getting surgery to rebuild his penis. He got married, I think had a kid, and sadly committed suicide at the age of 38. Yeah. Which says, and it's sort of the weird thing. That's sort of the crazy thing about the biology of sex. You can't stop it. And if you're heterosexual, you can't socialize a child to be the opposite sex, as this shows. If a child's gender doesn't match their biology, it's hard to try to change that. So we sort of have these innate biological qualities, and then society has sort of this idea about what males and females should and shouldn't be interested in. But you have to learn to separate the two. One is just the way we describe how males and females are supposed to act around one another, but the other is sort of that biological predisposition that you cannot change one way or the other. If your child is homosexual, they're homosexual. And if your child is heterosexual, they're heterosexual. You know what I mean? You can't sort of change that through environment. Now, what's that? What's that retraining therapy? There's actually there's some states where they have therapy. Gay conversion therapy is actually being outlawed in a lot of states because it's thought that it's cruel and unethical treatment. Has anybody ever heard of that, gay conversion therapy? Ooh, Okay, good. Maya's at least heard of it. Yeah, Chris. So, you know what? Chris, please come to webinar this week because I understand what you're saying. I sort of agree with you. I like the idea that the parents are trying not to constrain the kids' beliefs, abilities, and desires, but at the same time, it's weird because you need a little bit of direction too, right? Riley, well, maybe we'll talk about that. I'll have a video of the gay conversion therapy. We'll talk about that in class. And basically, Wednesday's webinar is going to be all about the socialization of gender and the upsides and the downsides of it. I hope everybody comes to lecture. Ooh, that's tonight at 8 p.m. Some of you coming tonight? Okay. Well, feminine qualities as a baby, he'd be if as a female now he's process being more towards the female side. Right, right. I mean, so you're just born that way. Now, quickly, the cognitive development of gender. I do want to put a little thing here to talk about the development of gender. If you think about it, your idea of yourself as being male or female is a schema, just like every other schema that you have. So you know what fire truck is, you know who George Washington is, you have a self schema, you also have a gender schema of an understanding of gender, and that develops throughout the pre-operational and concrete operational stages of Piaget's development. So at the age of 2 or 3, your kids are going to use the word male or female, but they're not even going to be sure what it's referring to because they're not going to use it consistently to refer to the same person. In fact, your book suggests that the boy or girl might call themselves a boy on one day and a girl the next day. So they understand the labels, but they just don't understand gender constancy, that you're either a boy or a girl. Now, at 3 or 4, the children develop a gender constancy, that your gender is not going to change, but they focus on what genders look like rather than the underlying qualities. So the little boy will think that long-haired kids are girls because that's just the way it works, right? But some little kids, some little boys may have long hair. They don't understand that. Or some little girls may have short hair. So they're going to have gender constancy, but they're going to focus on appearance to determine gender. And by the age of 5 or 6, when your kid starts to get into the concrete operational stage, they're going to have gender constancy, and they're also going to understand that gender is not determined by appearance. Now, if you come to my developmental psychology class, we'll also talk about the gender segregation that begins in early childhood and really starts to peak in middle and late childhood when boys play with boys and girls play with girls. And there are big punishments for switching gender groups at this age, right? Okay, so that's all I wanted to say for today. Thank you very much for those of you who came. Does anybody have any questions about today's lecture? Is there any questions? Fantastic. Well, look, don't forget webinar A, optional webinar A is tonight at 8 p.m. Nicole Ortiz, Tara, Riley, I expect to see all of you folks in webinar tonight, bringing some good conversational points about the video that I'm going to send around after class today. And we're going to be talking about the pros and cons of gender role socialization. Well, I hope I cleared it up for myself, Chris. And a lot of my adult friends still, I don't think, have all of these issues about sex and gender cleared up. Thank you very much for coming today. Glad you liked the lecture. I know. Okay. You're too much. You kids are too much. Thank you very much. Look, have a great day, and I look forward to seeing you at 8 o'clock tonight. All right, take care.